Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anthony Monahan, Tony, a professor in the Health, Physical Education, and Dance Department. His research dives into areas like health psychology, educational psychology, and cognitive psychology. And he's published and presented on a wide range of topics, from empathetic teaching and campus health initiatives like the Tiger Trails Project, to health promotion in the Caribbean, stress management, adapted physical education, study abroad, and global leadership. Outside of the classroom, Tony is also a self-taught artist who's been creating artwork since 1997. His pieces often reflect his deep appreciation for turtles, something that's inspired his extensive travel and work in turtle conservation. We're also excited to share that his newest exhibit will be opening in spring 2026 in the QCC Art Gallery. Tony, I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
We're really excited. So let's start at the very beginning. What inspired your research interest and how did it lead you to Queensborough?
I think we could start a little bit before that.
Sure.
Because I work very closely with my students. I relate to my students very much. I am a first-generation college student from my family. And I tell them the first time I see them, the greatest decision I ever made was to go to college. Now, that decision was a tough one for me because I was not supported at home. And that led me to have to work very hard to get through college. In fact, and my students know this, and it's hard to even say, but I was homeless for most of my college career.
Wow.
And I worked really hard to get through those years because I had a dream to be a teacher, to help people. And I bet on myself. So when I relate to my students, I really relate to my students. A lot of my students are first-generation college students, and they don't know if they're going to do it. And I have to tell them, it's up to you to work really hard, to have a dream, and to make it pay off.
If I could just stop you there, what's the difference when you share that with them? Because I'm listening to you and I'm immediately inspired. That must make a difference to them.
It took a lot of years for me to even admit that to my students. It took a lot of years to admit that. Being hungry, not knowing where to sleep, having friends help you out, sleeping in a car, sleeping in a tent in the woods. All of those things happened when I was in college.
Wow. But you had that focus that this is going to be something.
Saved my life. And I believe I'm in the perfect place in Queensborough. It's a wonderful place. The most diverse campus in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And as a teacher, all I want to do is help my students. And I've traveled, I've worked in several states, I've worked in different countries. I've gained multiple perspectives, as we say. I know what it's like to be a minority. I know what it's like to not understand languages and cultures and being in the middle of those things and trying to get your way through it. And again, I got myself through college. So that's what I try to instill in my students from day one. Mm-hmm. I tell them a quote. I tell them a quote from African-American artist, William H. Johnson. Mm-hmm. If it is to be, it is up to me. It's a sentence of 2-letter words. I write it on the board. If it is to be, it is up to me. I have my students repeat it. Mm. Now, the story of William H. Johnson is he grew up in South Carolina. African-American, around the turn of the century, he was born. He wanted to be an artist. And for an African-American man in South Carolina to be an artist was an impossible thing. So he saved up his money, he moved to New York City, he went to art school, and he became a famous artist. There's a 10-foot statue in Florence, South Carolina of William H. Johnson. I made a pilgrimage last year. I went to the statue. You know, thing's huge. But it inspires me. It inspires me, and I'm inspired every single day of my life. Mm. And when I go in that classroom, it just brings me back to my first class when I was in college. Not knowing if I'm going to do it, I'm not kind of being intimidated with all the other things going on. And now I'm in the end of my career, I'm going to retire this year. And again, the best decision I ever made was go to college.
Wow. I think your second best decision was to teach students. Because what a gift. What a gift.
Well, I take my natural talents and I add the knowledge that I learned and the experiences that I've had, and I put it all into the classroom. And I tell my students, when you're in that room, between those hours, you do everything you can to help your students to the best of your ability.
So
I live by 3 principles. Be real, be congruent, be real, be yourself, have positive regard, care about the success of your students, and to have empathy for their situations. I live that every day.
So I think so much, now that you've shared that, so much of your lived experience, I think, explains a little bit about some of your research and why you've been passionate about it. I think specifically about empathetic teaching practices and health on campus. I mean, I think I might know the answer to this based on what you just shared, but why are those so important to you, and why do you consider that important to the work that you do with students?
I think it started when I was working with special ed. I did 12 years of special ed. Special ed taught me patience, and it also taught me that all people learn at different rates. You know, you have to figure out what they can do and then what's next on the list of things to do. So having empathy for their situations is really important, and to understand that not everybody's like me. Everybody has their own way of learning, of doing, and try to understand those things and instill that in them as well. I teach a class called Foundations of Physical Education. The students in my class want to be teachers. You know, this semester I'm teaching that class for the last time. And I really want them to understand that being a phys ed teacher is not about just being athletic. It's not about being good at sports. The kids that we need to reach are the kids that aren't athletic, because we want to make them understand that physical activity is really good. So those kind of things. So if you take it on that end of who needs help the most and how can we help them, and how can we get to know those students to the point where we make a difference. You know, not everybody makes it, and I tell them that too. Not everybody makes it, but if they show up and they do the work, we're going to get them through.
That makes me think, one of the research topics that you put was adapted physical education.
Yeah.
What does that mean, and why is that important?
Adaptive physical education is phys ed, special ed. So when I first started in doing it, they would give me all the special ed kids, and I would take them to a gymnasium or something, and there'd be kids in wheelchairs and kids with Down syndrome and kids with visual problems, and they would be mixed. And it was just really wasn't working that well. But eventually we worked into mainstreaming and getting them into various classes that they might excel at. So you might say, okay, this kid might fit into this particular class, and you kind of slide them into different classes where they can work with their non-handicapped peers. And when I first started working that, I had some resistance from some of the old-time teachers. So just working with them and getting them to understand that, all right, this kid might not be able to do 30 sit-ups in a minute's time, especially since half of her body is paralyzed.
Right.
Okay, so I had a situation where I had a kid, half of her body was paralyzed. I got her into a badminton class so she can use one arm. Badminton, great. She was great at badminton. But the teacher had a requirement. They had to go down to the track twice a week, and they had to go around the track 4 times, and they had to do 30 sit-ups in a minute. It's like, oh, sorry, but she's not physically able to do that. And so the back and forth was that inspired me to write some articles and write some kind of some guidelines on how do we deal with a kid that might not be able to meet the standards that you have for all your regular students.
And that's that empathetic teaching that you talk about.
Yeah. Especially with, again, phys ed teachers want to be phys ed teachers because they're good at sports.
And when you have that foundations class that you were just talking about, do you bring some of that into that class? Some of that?
Sure. Yeah. We do a lot of discussions. We do a lot. We start off with advocacy, you know, defending and promoting what we do. It's very important. We work on pedagogy, the psychological stuff, the empathy stuff. And then, you know, we talk about putting together lesson plans and things like that. So it's a pretty dynamic class, and I'm looking forward to teaching it for one more time.
I know.
Semester.
I'm thinking about everything you've shared and everything that you talked about. But then on top of that, you're an artist.
Yeah.
You've been doing artwork since 1997. How did that come into your journey?
Well, before that, I would do Christmas cards. So I started doing Christmas cards about 1987, so about 10 years before. And I just started seeing some images, a lot of images in my head, and it wouldn't go away. And I was living in California at the time, and okay, I got to go to the art store. I bought a canvas, bought some paints, bought some brushes, and I started working on my first painting, and I haven't stopped since.
Wow.
I moved on from painting about a year later to paper structure, which is layers and layers of paper. A lot of times I use nuts and bolts and screws and stuff because it's very dimensional. Working with paper allows me to use both of my hands. And sometimes with painting, you kind of have to be on your game all the time. But with paper, there's always things that need to be cut out that you don't have to, you can just blindly cut things out. And at the end, when you put things together, that's when you're being very creative. So it takes a long time to do an artwork, a piece of art. I just finished a piece a few months ago that I started in 2021. And this is the only time I've ever done this, but I kept track of my hours. And it was 264 hours that I spent on this one piece.
And so I think about that. You were self-taught. What was that journey like of discovering and teaching yourself art while you were so involved in academia? How did those two worlds work together?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to when I tell my students when they're in that room between those hours and they work with their kids, when you leave the building, when you leave the parking lot, then you can live your life. And I always worked that I'm not going to do any work. I got to a point where I'm not going to do a lot of work outside of the class. When I am in my office, everything I work on is school related. And I'll stay in my office all night long if I have to correct things, I have to grade things, because I'm not taking it home. I work in my office to do the work for my school. When I leave the parking lot, I kind of consider it a whole other job. And when I'm doing artwork, that's when I'm feeling great. I feel good. I don't have to think a lot about it. Both of my hands are working. I can have conversations. I can have the TV on. I have music on. And I'm just cutting and ripping and gluing. And
You have mastered what some people are still struggling with, that work-life balance.
yeah, it took a long time. It took a long time, but yes, I have. I can certainly say
Yeah,
that.
that's really good. So throughout this process of teaching yourself art, you can let me know how this worked. Did you fall in love with turtles because of the art, or did you always love turtles and so you introduced them into the art?
I always loved turtles. When I was a kid, I didn't have a dog or a cat. I caught a turtle and my mom allowed me to keep it for a pet, and that's how it started. Now, I didn't have a lot of turtles when I moved around and living overseas and stuff. I always loved them. And for a while, I had a big collection of turtle t-shirts and turtle books and things like that. My Christmas cards always had turtles in them. And so, yeah, the turtles were the reason that I do artwork is because of turtles. I'm not going to paint a landscape, for example.
Without them.
Not going to happen. It's just my focus. And I am unapologetic about that.
And so part of that, you've also been very passionate about turtle conservation. How has that worked into what limited free time I imagine you have between art and academia doing that work?
Yeah, so this all started in 2015 when my department chair, young Kim, popped his head in my office and said, "Hey, would you like to teach stress management?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to teach stress management." So I worked on studying about how to teach stress management. And stress management in a nutshell is doing the things that you love to do, doing the healthy things you love to do. Now, I do love turtles and I do love doing the art, but I was thinking, all right, how can I do something that doesn't take several months? So I bought a nice camera. I went to the New York Turtle and Tortoise Society show. And I went there and I took some photos of turtles and I really liked it. I enjoyed it. So I thought, all right, where else can I see turtles? Now, I didn't want to go crawling around the woods and getting muddy in the swamps. And I didn't want to do that stuff. So I figured, all right, the best thing I can do is go to zoos and aquariums. So where can I see turtles? So I started to take trips. I started in Alabama, went to Texas, went to a lot of different places. And as I was taking these trips, I learned more and more about turtles. Like, I love turtles, but I didn't realize that over half of the species are endangered of extinction.
And I didn't know that until I started researching for this interview. I didn't know that either.
And so that's pretty startling. So I learned a lot about it. And I also learned that people love turtles. Like, kids will walk around the corner and say, "Oh, turtles." You don't really do that for zebras or giraffes and stuff. So people love turtles. And I figured, all right, there needs to be some kind of book, some kind of guidebook for this. So I kind of set my sights on, all right, let me gather the information. So I created the Turtle Lovers Guidebook, which is published in 2024. It's got 164 public sites where people can go and see turtles. It's got organizations, rescues, chapter on turtles on social media, projects and programs. So it's an all-encompassing research about turtles in the United States.
And you talked about a couple of places that you've been to. You've almost been to almost every state.
I've been to every state.
Yeah, in research for this, yeah.
Yeah, I've been to all 50 states.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I'm working on the world now. So now I'm working on the World Book of Turtle Conservation, and it's going to be released in volumes. Volume 1 will be North America. Still working on Mexico. Volume 2 is Europe. Started Europe already. And after I retire in May, we're going to take a big tour of Europe for 5 or 6 weeks. Volume 3 will be Africa and the rest of the world. Yeah.
But before you retire, you have an exhibit that's coming up at the QCC Art Gallery. I don't know how much you're able to give us a little tease of what that exhibit will be.
Well, I was really fortunate to have had an exhibit in 2016 called Carapace Explorations. So I have a whole bunch of new pieces since that exhibit. So we'll see what happens. I'm trying to finish a piece, and I've been working on it a lot. I worked on it yesterday, called Circles of Boxes, that I started in 1998.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know when? You don't know when in spring it'll open.
Well, we're going to be talking with Faustine about that.
Okay.
We'll see. I'm trying to see if I can finish this piece of art that I started 27 years ago. Working on it.
Okay.
It's got 64 turtles.
I know. So you plan to retire after the spring 2026 semester. Yeah. What's been one of the most surprising lessons you've learned about yourself and your students since you've been here?
So the first time I came here, after my interviews, first time I came here to work was orientation. And I was so nervous that I stopped over at the Oakland Lake and I sat on a bench, taking a breath, breathing, and I was like, okay. So I went to the orientation and I was just blown away by the amazing professors that I was working with. I just couldn't believe the knowledge and experience of all the new professors that started with me. I was just like, oh my God, this place is amazing. And I kind of feel that I started on a kind of a high and I just wanted to just ride the wave. I am just thrilled that every class I have is a virtual United Nations. I really like that. And again, care about the success of your students. That's what I want to do. Understand that a lot of our students work. They work 2, 3 jobs. I worked 2, 3 jobs when I was in college. I relate to that. I understand the situations that they're put on them. I understand the pressures that are put on them because I went through that. So I think that just my experiences overseas, my experiences being a teacher the whole time, working with special ed, working with diverse populations, I think it made me the perfect person to work here.
I think so too.
As far as being a teacher, it's been a wonderful thing. I'm still going to be an educator of sorts when I go into turtle conservation. And I think that all of the things that I learned through my education and through my experiences had led me to the point to be able to write books, to be able to speak in front of audiences, has been able to, write articles and all of those things. It's a blessing.
Is there any one research project or article that you think really speaks to the core of what you always wanted to bring as an educator?
Well, I think that the Tiger Trails project was a lot of fun. Now, when I first started, I was wanted to make a pilgrimage up to Cortland, SUNY Cortland.
Okay.
Now, SUNY Cortland is like the phys ed mecca of the United States. That's the phys ed college. So it's like, you know what, let me take a trip up to Cortland and see what it's all about. And it's a fairly small campus. And what struck me was they got a bus that goes from one end to the other. And there are kids going on a bus. And I was like, wait, it's a phys ed college. You got a bus coming from here to there? So that got me thinking about, wait a minute, let's figure out how many calories does it take to go from building A to building B? How many steps? How far? So we got the classes together and we had pedometers and we counted how many calories from building A to building B. And we measured over 500 measurements, stairs, buildings, all of that stuff. It was amazing. It was a lot of fun. And for example, the Spanish stairs that go along the library, 12 calories up, 8 calories down.
Good to know.
Up and down one time, that's 20 calories. You eat a 400-calorie piece of pizza at the Science Cafe, you got to go up and down 20 times to burn off that 400 calories. So that was fun. And I got Ed Davis from engineering came in and he contributed his class. They did surveying. They measured the heights of the hills and the stairs. We got the math department involved. They did the whole algebraic matrix where they broke down how many calories of a normal day. We've got the video. We had a video on it. We got a lot of people involved, and it was kind of a fun project. And I don't know, that was just kind of it was kind of a neat project to be involved.
That does sound like that was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Yeah.
I know you've talked a lot about retirement, but one of the things that you say that you plan to do is continue your work in turtle conservation. So what's next in that work, or what, I know you mentioned the travel. Is there anything else that you see yourself doing?
Yeah, well, this summer I was able to speak at the Turtle Survival Alliance Conference, which is the biggest turtle conference in the world. So I had the privilege of speaking on it, and my topic was the World Book of Turtle Conservation, which is my new project. As I said, my first volume of that book is going to be North America. I've got a lot of the information. I've got all the information from the United States already. This summer I was up in Canada, got a lot of information, a lot of research, a lot of good things going on up there. Went to Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, Grand Cayman Island, spent some time in Mexico, going back to Mexico in January, and back again in Mexico in July next year. So pretty much we'll have volume 1 put together by the end of next year.
Okay.
And again, my partner Joni and I are both retiring at the same time. And she's on the journey with me. We're going to go to Europe in at the end of May, beginning of June. And we're going to start in Amsterdam, and we're going to do a train tour, URL tour of 13 countries around Europe for about 5 or 6 weeks.
Wow, that's going to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So making connections. I'll be in England to speak at the European Turtle Alliance conference. So I'll be excited to do that. I'm going to talk about my books. I'm also going to have 2 talks. One is going to be for my books, and the other is going to be about my art.
Good. Okay. All right. Before we wrap up, we've talked so much about this being your last year, but staying in the moment, what do you want to savor in this last year? What are the things you really want to soak up before the end of the academic year?
I like when my students are engaged, so I wanted to get them involved in working together in groups. You know, we went through a couple of years where it was really weird, where people didn't talk to each other after COVID.
I was going to say, was this post-pandemic?
Really I'd be like, hey, everybody, please talk. You're freaking me out. Now they're coming around. This last year was wonderful. The students get together, they're talking, and there was a time when I would have to say, everyone quiet down so I could take attendance. And then we went through a whole period. It was like, please, everyone talk. I tell them, you're not going to have this opportunity to be in a room with a bunch of people your age. You're not going to get that in 20 years. It's not going to happen. So please take advantage of being in college. College is not about just learning academics. It's the social life and all that. So I like when they're engaged with each other. And I'm happy that this last year was more of that. So I want more of that. I want more group work. I want them to be talking and using the knowledge. You know, I want my knowledge to be accessible to them, and I want them to be able to use it outside of their classroom. So those kind of things where they're engaged, they're not just sitting and listening to me. They're working with each other. So I'm going to do a little bit more of that this year.
That's good. I don't think these students realize already what a gift they have, that they're going to get you before you leave.
I'm really celebrating it every day. I always enjoyed being a teacher. I wake up every morning thankful that I made the right decisions. At least in profession, I made the right decisions. And I'm thankful that I'm a teacher, and I'll celebrate every day.
Oh, well, Tony, I'm thankful that you took the time to talk to me today. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad that I got to know you better. And I hope that you will join us next time when we will get to know someone else from Queensborough Community College.